The sun had barely peeked over the horizon when the shrill sound of Karen's voice pierced the peaceful Saturday morning. Storming out of her immaculate townhouse, her face contorted in a mask of fury, she marched towards the sidewalk where a group of children giggled and chattered as they expertly decorated the concrete with vibrant chalk drawings. "What do you little brats think you're doing?" Karen's shrill demand cut through the kids' laughter, causing them to fall silent and stare at her wide-eyed. "This is public property, and you're making a mess. I demand you stop this at once." The children, ranging from 7 to 12 years old, exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of how to respond to this irate woman. One brave soul, a freckle-faced girl named Lily, stepped forward. "But ma'am, we're having a neighborhood art competition. The winner gets a prize." Karen scoffed, her nostrils flaring. "Art competition? Don't make me laugh. This is nothing but vandalism, and I won't stand for it." She turned to the gathered parents, who had emerged from their homes to witness the confrontation. "Where are your children's parents? Aren't you responsible for their behavior?" A tall, broad-shouldered man with kind eyes approached Karen, his voice calm and measured. "Ma'am, these kids are just having some harmless fun. They're not causing any damage, and the chalk will wash away with the next rain." "Harmless fun. Damage?" Karen interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "This is unacceptable. I pay good money to live in this neighborhood, and I won't tolerate this kind of disrespect for public property." She spun around, pointing an accusatory finger at the children. "If you don't stop this right now, I'll call the police." The parents exchanged concerned glances, unsure of how to de-escalate the situation. Lily, still standing her ground, spoke up again. "But ma'am, we're not doing anything wrong. We have permission from the neighborhood association to have this competition." Karen's face contorted in a mixture of shock and indignation. "Permission? The neighborhood association? Don't be ridiculous." She whirled around, glaring at the parents. "Well, I'm calling the police, and I'm going to make sure all of you face the consequences of your children's vandalism." As Karen stormed back towards her house, the children looked on in stunned silence, their vibrant chalk drawings forgotten in the wake of this unexpected confrontation. The parents exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to proceed, but one thing was clear. Karen's entitled behavior had set the stage for a clash that would shake the very foundation of their peaceful neighborhood. The shrill sound of a police siren pierced the air, cutting through the tense silence that had settled over the neighborhood. Within minutes, 2 uniformed officers arrived on the scene, their expressions a mix of confusion and concern as they approached the group of parents and children. Karen, her face triumphant, wasted no time in launching into her tirade. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. These children are vandalizing public property, and the parents refuse to take responsibility for their actions." The officers exchanged a glance, then one of them stepped forward, holding up a hand to silence Karen. "Ma'am, we've received a call from the neighborhood association about a planned art competition. They've informed us that these children have permission to use chalk on the sidewalks." Karen's face contorted in a mask of fury, her cheeks flushing with a deep shade of red. "What? That can't be true. I live here, and I've never heard of any such thing." The second officer spoke up, his tone firm yet polite. "Ma'am, we've verified the information with the association. This event has been approved and scheduled for today. Unless there's evidence of any actual vandalism or damage, we have no grounds to intervene." Karen opened her mouth, a fresh tirade on the tip of her tongue. But before she could speak, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd, the president of the neighborhood association, Ms. Evelyn. "What's going on here?" Evelyn asked, her gaze sweeping across the scene. "Officers, is there a problem?" "No, ma'am," the first officer replied. "We received a call about vandalism, but it appears this is a sanctioned event. We're just ensuring there's no issue." Evelyn turned to Karen, her expression a mix of concern and disapproval. "Karen, I'm surprised to see you causing a disturbance. Didn't you receive the flyers and emails about the neighborhood art competition? We sent them to every household in the area. Karen's face flushed with embarrassment, and she stammered, I must have missed them. But that still doesn't excuse this mess. Evelyn sighed, shaking her head. Karen, these children are simply exercising their creativity and having fun. The chalk will wash away, and this event brings the community together. I'm disappointed to see you causing such a scene. The officers glanced at each other, then nodded to Evelyn. Ma'am, it seems everything is in order here. We'll be on our way. Please let us know if there are any issues. As the police car drove away, the parents and children turned their attention to Karen, their expressions a mix of relief and resentment. The once peaceful neighborhood had been divided, and Karen had become the catalyst for a brewing conflict that threatened to tear the community apart. The confrontation with the police had left Karen seething with a mix of humiliation and fury. As she retreated back to her townhouse, her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each more venomous than the last. How dare they? She muttered under her breath, her hands trembling with barely contained rage. I pay my taxes, and this is how the neighborhood association treats me. Allowing those brats to deface public property, and the police just stand by and do nothing. Karen paced back and forth in her immaculate living room, her gaze fixed on the window, where she could see the children laughing and chatting as they continued their chalk drawings. The vibrant colors mocked her, a constant reminder of her humiliation. I'll show them, she growled, her eyes narrowing as a plan began to take shape in her mind. Grabbing her phone, she furiously began typing, her fingers moving with a sense of purpose that bordered on obsession. Within minutes, Karen had composed a scathing email, addressed to every member of the neighborhood association's board. Her words dripped with venom, accusing the organization of negligence, a failure to uphold community standards, and a blatant disregard for the concerns of tax-paying residents. This is an outrage, she wrote, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. I demand that the neighborhood association take immediate action to shut down this so-called art competition and ensure that those children are held accountable for their vandalism. If you fail to do so, I will have no choice but to take this matter to the city council and the local media. Satisfied with her message, Karen pressed the send button, a grim smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She knew that her words would create a storm, a ripple effect that would reverberate throughout the community. And this time, she was determined to come out on top. As the email made its way to the inboxes of the association's board members, Karen turned her attention to her next move. She would not rest until she had secured a victory, even if it meant pitting neighbor against neighbor and tearing the community apart in the process. The stage was set for a battle of wills, and Karen was prepared to fight tooth and nail to assert her perceived right to control the neighborhood she called home. The members of the Neighborhood Association's board were gathered around the conference table, their faces etched with a mix of concern and frustration as they read through Karen's scathing email. Ms. Evelyn, the association president, let out a heavy sigh as she set down the printout, her brow furrowed. Well, it seems we have a situation on our hands, she began, her gaze sweeping across the assembled group. Karen is clearly unhappy with the chalk art competition, and she's demanding that we shut it down. One of the board members, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Wilkins, shook her head. This is outrageous. The children are having a wonderful time, and the chalk will wash away with the next rain. What's the harm in letting them express their creativity? Another member, a young tech entrepreneur named Alex, chimed in. I agree. And from what I understand, the association approved this event months ago. We can't just cave to Karen's demands simply because she's throwing a tantrum. Ms. Evelyn nodded, her expression grave. I understand your concerns, but we can't ignore the fact that Karen is a vocal and influential member of this community. If we don't handle this delicately, it could escalate and cause more problems. The board members exchanged glances, each weighing the potential consequences of their actions. Finally, Mrs. Wilkins spoke up, her voice firm. We can't let one person's entitlement dictate the experiences of the entire neighborhood. These children are having fun, and the event is within our approved guidelines. We need to stand our ground and support them. Alex nodded in agreement. I agree. We should respond to Karen's email, reaffirming the association's approval of the event and reminding her that the chalk drawings are temporary and approved by the community. Ms. Evelyn considered the suggestions, then nodded slowly. Very well. Let's craft a response that is firm yet diplomatic. We need to make it clear that we won't be bullied, but also avoid escalating the situation unnecessarily. As the board members began drafting their response, a sense of resolve settled over the group. They knew that standing up to Karen's entitled behavior would not be easy, but they were determined to protect the inclusive spirit of their community, even if it meant facing the wrath of an irate and influential neighbor. The stage was set for a showdown, one that would test the very foundations of the neighborhood and the strength of its residents to stand united against a common adversary. As the sun began to set over the neighborhood, Karen's phone chimed with the arrival of a new email. Her eyes narrowed as she recognized the sender, the Neighborhood Association's Board of Directors. With a sense of anticipation, she opened the message, her fingers trembling with barely contained excitement. The email began with a formal greeting, acknowledging Karen's concerns about the chalk art competition. However, the tone quickly shifted as the board members firmly reaffirmed their support for the event and their commitment to fostering a sense of community within the neighborhood. Ms. Karen, the email read, "We understand your frustration, but the chalk art competition has been a long-standing tradition in our community and one that has been approved by the association. The temporary nature of the chalk drawings, coupled with the joy and creativity they bring to the children, make this a worthwhile endeavor that we have no intention of discontinuing." Karen's face contorted in a mask of fury as she read on, her knuckles turning white from the intensity of her grip on the phone. "We appreciate your concerns about the upkeep of our public spaces," the email continued, "but we believe that this event is a harmless and positive way for our residents to come together and express themselves. The chalk will wash away with the next rain, and the children will have memories of a wonderful experience." The board members then went on to address Karen's threat of involving the city council and the media, making it clear that they would not be intimidated by such actions. "While we respect your right to voice your opinion, we will not be bullied or coerced into shutting down an event that has the overwhelming support of our community. Should you choose to escalate this matter further, we will be forced to respond accordingly." The email concluded with a polite yet firm invitation for Karen to attend the next association meeting, where she could voice her concerns in a constructive manner and engage in a dialogue with her fellow residents. As Karen read the final lines, her face flushed with a mixture of rage and disbelief. They were defying her, refusing to cave to her demands, and she could not accept it. With a guttural growl, she hurled her phone across the room, watching as it shattered against the wall. "We'll see about that," she muttered, her mind already racing with a new plan of attack. The battle lines had been drawn, and Karen was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the cost. Karen's fury had reached a boiling point, and she was no longer content with simply firing off angry emails to the neighborhood association. She was determined to take her fight to the next level, harnessing the power of her influence and connections to bring about the downfall of the chalk art competition. First, she reached out to her friend, a local news reporter named Sarah, spinning a narrative of a neighborhood in chaos, with the association's board members turning a blind eye to the vandalism perpetrated by unruly children. Sarah, eager for a juicy story, eagerly agreed to cover the controversy, promising to have a news crew on the scene for the following day's events. Next, Karen made a call to her acquaintance, a city council member named David, whom she had supported financially during his election campaign. With a mixture of flattery and veiled threats, she convinced him to look into the legality of the neighborhood association's approval of the chalk art competition, hinting at potential zoning violations and a lack of proper permitting. As the sun rose on the day of the competition, Karen stood on her porch, a triumphant smirk plastered across her face. She could already hear the distant sound of children's laughter and the scraping of chalk against the sidewalk, and it only served to fuel her determination. Moments later, a convoy of news vans and police cars descended upon the neighborhood, their sirens blaring. Karen watched with glee as the unsuspecting families were confronted by the sudden onslaught of activity, their faces etched with confusion and concern. The news crew, led by Sarah, rushed to the scene, eager to capture the drama unfolding before them. They thrust microphones into the faces of the bewildered parents, demanding comments on the vandalism and the association's failure to maintain order. Meanwhile, the police officers began informing the children and their families that the chalk art competition had been deemed illegal, and that they would need to cease their activities immediately or face potential fines and arrests. As the chaos unfolded, Karen stood back, her arms crossed over her chest, a satisfied expression on her face. She had played her cards perfectly, manipulating the system to achieve her desired outcome. The neighborhood she had once sought to control was now in turmoil, and she reveled in the knowledge that she had emerged victorious. But little did Karen know that her actions had set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to her own downfall, as the community she had once called home began to turn against her in ways she could never have imagined. As the news crew and police officers swarmed the neighborhood, the once joyful atmosphere quickly turned to one of confusion and outrage. The parents, who had been happily watching their children express their creativity, now found themselves facing down a sudden barrage of unwanted attention and authority. "What's going on?" cried a frantic mother, her eyes wide with concern. "We have permission from the neighborhood association to hold this event. Why are the police telling us to stop?" The news reporter, Sarah, thrust her microphone in the woman's face, a gleam of triumph in her eyes. "Ma'am, can you comment on the vandalism and the apparent failure of the neighborhood association to maintain order?" The mother recoiled, her brow furrowing in a mix of bewilderment and anger. "Vandalism? This is a sanctioned event. The children are just having fun and expressing themselves. What's the problem?" As the news crew continued to pepper the parents with questions, the true nature of the situation began to emerge. One by one, the neighbors stepped forward, voicing their support for the chalk art competition and their confusion over the sudden police presence. It was then that Ms. Evelyn, the president of the neighborhood association, arrived on the scene, her face etched with a mix of concern and determination. Striding through the crowd, she confronted the police officers, her voice firm and unwavering. "Officers, I must insist that you stand down immediately. This event has been approved by the neighborhood association, and these children are not engaging in any unlawful activities." The police officers exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions betraying their own uncertainty. One of them cleared his throat, addressing Ms. Evelyn. "Ma'am, we received a call about vandalism and a report that the event was not properly permitted. We're just here to ensure the law is being followed." Ms. Evelyn shook her head, her gaze hardening. "That's simply not true. The association has all the necessary documentation, and we've been planning this event for months. I'm afraid someone has been spreading misinformation, and it's causing unnecessary disruption in our community." The news reporter, Sarah, stepped forward, a frown creasing her brow. "But we were told this was an act of vandalism. Surely the association can't just allow children to deface public property." Ms. Evelyn turned to Sarah, her expression a mix of disappointment and pity. "I'm afraid you've been misled, Ms. Reporter. This is a beloved annual event, and the chalk will wash away with the next rain. I can assure you that there is no vandalism taking place here." As the police officers and news crew began to retreat, a hush fell over the crowd. The parents and children exchanged relieved glances, their faith in the neighborhood association restored. But in the midst of the crowd, Karen stood, her face a mask of fury and disbelief, her carefully crafted plan unraveling before her eyes. The tide had turned, and the community she had sought to divide was now standing united against her entitled and destructive behavior. As the dust settled and the police and news crews departed, the neighborhood residents gathered around, their expressions a mix of relief and indignation. All eyes were on Karen, who stood alone, her face a mask of seething rage. Ms. Evelyn approached her, her gaze steady and unrelenting. "Karen, I'm deeply disappointed in your actions. You've caused a great deal of disruption and distress in our community, all for the sake of your own misguided sense of entitlement." Karen opened her mouth, ready to launch into another tirade, but Ms. Evelyn raised a hand, silencing her. "No, Karen, it's time for you to listen. Your behavior has not only embarrassed you, but it's also threatened the very fabric of our neighborhood. We are a community, and we stand together, even in the face of those who would seek to divide us." The gathered residents murmured in agreement, their expressions hardening as they turned their collective gaze towards Karen. "You know, Karen," Ms. Evelyn continued, "the neighborhood association has been receiving a lot of calls and emails from concerned residents. They're all wondering the same thing. How can we ensure that someone like Karen doesn't cause such destruction again?" Karen's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her features. "What are you saying?" she demanded, her voice quivering slightly. Ms. Evelyn's lips curled into a small smile. "Well, Karen, it seems the community has spoken. They've decided that your behavior is simply unacceptable, and they'd voted unanimously to revoke your membership in the neighborhood association." The gathered crowd erupted into cheers and applause, their faces alight with a sense of triumph and justice. Karen stood there, stunned, her mouth agape. "You can't do this," she cried, her voice rising to a shrill wail. "I'll sue you all. I'll take this to the media." Ms. Evelyn shook her head, her expression unwavering. "That won't be necessary, Karen. You see, the community has also decided that, as a result of your actions, you are no longer welcome in this neighborhood. You have until the end of the month to sell your home and move out." Karen's face contorted in a mask of utter disbelief and horror. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her hands trembling. "I'm a taxpayer. I have rights." But the residents stood firm, their expressions unyielding. They had witnessed firsthand the damage that Karen's entitled behavior could wreak, and they were determined to protect the spirit of their community. As Karen's wails faded into the distance, the children returned to their chalk drawings, their laughter and chatter filling the air. The neighborhood had emerged from the conflict stronger and more united than ever before, a testament to the power of community and the triumph of justice over entitlement. And so, Karen's reign of terror had come to an end, leaving her with nothing but the bitter taste of her own downfall.